Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Oh, they're here. We'll wait for them. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the April 4th Board of Education meeting. If everyone could please rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If the district clerk could please take a roll call.
Yes. Adam Smith,
Present.
Deborah Brooks. Here. Emily Bays,
Present.
Adam Block,
Present.
Julie Epstein,
Here.
Rachel Gilliard,
Here.
Nanette Melkonian.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Brooks, do you have a motion?
I most certainly do. I would like to make a motion to recess into exec session to discuss the employment history of several particular people, as well as the status of potential litigation.
Dr. Block, do I see a second? All in favor? 7-0. We'll see you in an hour. Ms. Brooks, do you have a motion?
Sure, I make a motion to resume into public session.
Ms. Gilliard, a second? Absolutely. Thank you. All in favor of reconvening? 7-0. Great. With that, if the district clerk could please take the roll call.
Yes. Adam Smith,
Here?
Deborah Brooks,
Here.
Emily Bays,
Present.
Adam Block,
Present.
Julie Epstein,
Here.
Rachel Gilliard,
Here.
Nanette Melkonian. Here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. So we do not have a student performance tonight. No. So there's no recognition, so we'll go right to the adoption of the agenda. Could we please get a motion for the adoption of the April 4th agenda? Ms. Brooks, a second. Ms. Bays, all in favor? 7-0. Great. Just want to thank everybody, as always, for attending tonight. And I know we've been seeing a lot of each other, but we're nearing the end of these budget presentations. So with no further ado, Dr. Hines, you can please have your report.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Dr. Shields, if you wouldn't mind, just an update with enrollment.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. Although we recently did an enrollment report calculation on March 29th. At that time, we had 5,270 students. That's 37 more students than we had this time last year.
Thank you, Dr. Shields. So I have three things very quickly because I know we have two presentations. The first is, and as I said in the fireside chat, it's Autism Awareness Month, and anything we can do to promote inclusivity within our school district is certainly appreciated, and I just want to bring that to everyone's attention. Second, we're going to hear from Ms. Manuel about the budget, and as far as where we are at the moment, I want to thank our district office. I want to thank our administrators for working very closely over the past several months. This budget is incredibly student-centered, and very much looking forward to this evening. The third has to do with something that I've been hearing, and I know the board has too, over the past several months, concerns about screen time, concerns about some of our students bringing back and forth iPads and or Chromebooks. I just want to give you an update in relation to what I'm recommending for next year. Starting next year, any student who's in pre-K and in kindergarten will not have to bring their iPads back and forth from school to home. We're going to monitor how that's working and then continue those conversations as next year moves on. So I just want to update the board about that. Thank you.
With that, thank you very much, Dr. Hines, and we will now move on to our first opportunity for community comments. Just a reminder, each speaker is entitled to 3 minutes, and any questions that are possible and appropriate for us to answer, we will try to do so at the following meeting.
The first speaker is Pat Baglio. Good evening. Whoops. Pat Baglio, co-president, Port Washington Paraprofessional Association, representing the educational assistants, teaching assistants, information technology aides, and monitors from the Port Washington School District. While we appreciate budgetary concerns and the need to reduce the gap between expenditures and tax revenue, we respectfully question the proposed reduction in staff of 25 paraprofessionals. Fewer CSE hours will certainly reduce the need for some EAs and TAs in elementary classrooms, but it's important to note that some of those same EAs and TAs provide supervision of students at arrival, lunch recess, and dismissal. For many years, we've had discussions about safe playground adult-to-student ratios, and it's not only about those numbers. You also have to consider the configuration of the playground as well, so that all areas are well supervised. We know that we are stretched thin at those times now, and that many of the paras on these duties are actually on CSE hours doing double duty, watching their own student as well as other students. We know that it is a hot topic among students, parents, and staff when recess time is abbreviated or restricted due to lack of staff, and we know that arrival and dismissal times with so many moving parts, people, cars, buses, can potentially be very dangerous without adequate supervision. And let's not forget that it's not just a reduction in CSE hours that accounts for the total number of positions being eliminated. Principals have been also asked to reduce building hours as well. So there'll be fewer paras available at the high school and middle school for doors and hallways and cafeteria and commons, and fewer building paras on those busiest times of arrival, lunch, recess, and dismissal at the elementary schools, on top of the elimination of the paras that might have been with their assigned students. Clearly, there will now be less staff available for all these key assignments, and we are concerned about the impact on safety and security and access to outdoor spaces during recess. Throughout the last few years, our members have witnessed firsthand an increase in social emotional issues, learning loss, and far more difficult behaviors than we are accustomed to seeing in our classrooms. We have heard many comments about these very concerns at
30
recent Board of
seconds
Ed
remaining.
meetings. So it's hard to reconcile all these concerns with a decision to remove some of the very same paraprofessionals that support these students. Thank you.
Jessica Melwani.
Good evening. As a member of the Legislative Task Force, I would like to address the board's recent discussions about state-funded school meals for all New York kids. Having seen this issue through the task force's process, while I am disappointed by the board's rejection of a recommendation to advocate for stigma-free meals for all, I am more frustrated by the lack of urgency, information, and compassion with which that recommendation was considered. Tonight, I wish to address the matter of means testing, which underpinned much of the reticence. Who would actually benefit from this expanded school meals program, and why should the state budget support them? Currently, a family of four must present a gross household income under $51,338 to receive free or reduced school meals. Families with income just 1 penny above that threshold are out of luck. To that point, Mr. Smith asked an important question. Is this a problem here? The answer last month was insufficient, so I'll take a stab at it now. According to the most recent 2021 census data, of the nearly 3,900 Port Washington families with children under the age of 18, 26% have a gross household income less than $100,000. Let that sink in. More than 1/4 of families in our district that will have children in our schools in the next 5 years earn less than what it takes to survive in Nassau County, according to multiple well-accepted measures of livability, including the United Way's ALICE threshold, the University of Washington's self-sufficiency standard, and MIT's living wage model. But let's dig deeper. Of the Port Washington families with household income less than $100,000, 56% earn between $50,000 and $100,000. That means that nearly 600 families, upwards of 1,000 children in our district's pipeline, do not qualify for free or reduced meals, yet also do not have what is widely considered to be a sustainable household income. It also means that there are more families that would truly benefit from this plan but don't qualify under current policy than those that do. So is this a problem here? You tell me. How many hungry kids, how many economically vulnerable households are a problem? What's the magic number that would have compelled this board to sign a letter supporting a bipartisan effort to ensure that all children have access to a stigma-free, healthy meals at school? The task force's recommendation of advocacy on this issue was the easy ask, a softball, a zero-effort way to lead on an issue core to student success at a cost equivalent to 0.1% of the governor's proposed budget, with no proposed cuts to educational funding, while Albany sits on an $8.7 billion budget surplus. If free meals somehow do not make it into the governor's final budget, I hope this board is prepared to wrestle with much tougher questions. For instance, do you support the USDA's proposal to lower the community eligibility provision to 25% despite the cost to our district in at least one of our buildings? Will you grapple with the thorny point Ms. Gilliar raised about the flaws in our current means testing model? Will you advocate for revising the federal income eligibility guidelines, which haven't been updated in 40 years, now that you know there are 600 ineligible Port Washington families representing many more students living below the household sustainability threshold? Given the governor's budget is not final, I ask one last time. Before the week is out, will each of you personally voice to our governor your support for stigma-free school meals for all and fight to end child hunger? I urge any community members who care about this to do the same while this budget is still in play. Thank you.
Christine Elliott Negri.
the parent of a kindergarten student at Sousa, and I've been working with a group of fellow elementary school parents who are urging the Port Washington School District to eliminate the carrying back and forth of district-provided electronic devices such as iPads and Chromebooks. We have created a petition that now has 150 signatures that support ending children having to carry these heavy devices back and forth. We would like the elimination at all grade levels. We feel like that their backpacks are far too heavy. The recommendation is that children carry no more than 10% of their body weight. My daughter's backpack is well above 10% of her body weight. My question for a response at the next meeting is, will the administration and the board support taking measures to eliminate children having to carry these heavy backpacks with school district issued electronic devices at all grade levels? Thank you.
No other community comments.
Great. Thank you to all of our community members who spoke. With that. No, it'll come up with old business. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to move on to item 10.1, and I believe Dr. Hines, you wanted to respond to Ms. Baglio's comments now.
Thank you, Ms. Baglio, and I appreciate you. Everything you said is true as far as what you all do for our students. And I just want to dispel, I think, some potential misconceptions as far as what this means regarding what we're talking about as far as the 25 staff members. So I'm going to ask both Dr. Shields and Dr. Allen to just briefly discuss this as we're bringing up the budget presentation, and then Ms. Manuel will begin. So Dr. Shields, if you wouldn't mind, thanks.
Of course. So I just wanted to be clear to the community on the 25 paraprofessionals that Ms. Baglio referred to. So the 25 paraprofessionals would come out of different components of our staffing that we have across the district. So 16 are projected to come out of the Committee of Special Ed process. That's based on projections, based on upcoming annual reviews. That's still to be determined at a future date. But 5 would also come out of pre-K. Pre-K program has 2 EAs in each classroom. They used to have 1 in each classroom, so they'd be going back to that 1 per classroom instead of having 2 per classroom. And then the remaining 4 would come from buildings across the district. So they would be, probably evenly allocated between secondary and elementary. So that's really 2 from the middle school and high school, roughly, and then 2 roughly across all 5 elementary schools. So I wanted to help put it in some context for you as to where these reductions would come from. I'm going to let Dr. Allen explain a little to you on how that process unfolds. And that 16 didn't just come out of thin air. It came out of some very careful analysis that's done by Dr. Allen and her department.
Thank you, Dr. Shields. So we start our process of projecting placements, services, things like that back in November. Obviously, the focus at the CSE is always on whatever the needs of the students are. Over the last couple of years, however, we've been fortunate to be able to develop new programs, specifically ICT, that we didn't have before, that enables us to put students in a different kind of setting to get their services rather than having some sort of support in a general education classroom or even potentially a self-contained classroom. The other thing that we've done is implement behaviorists full-time at our elementary schools. All 5 elementary schools have a full-time behaviorist that works with our staff, works with our teachers to identify, is this a student that might need an individualized support due to a behavior plan, or is this more strategies that we can use in the classroom setting that we currently have versus adding another person. We also have things every year. Students graduate, they physically move to other districts, they might move to out-of-district programs, things like that. There is a lot of fluctuation in our CSE, EA, and TAs every year, We just don't really have these kinds of open conversations necessarily about it at a board meeting.
So, Ms. Manuel, I know we're ready with the budget presentation. And of course, any questions the board has related to anything related to the items that we have, we'll certainly answer.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. Excuse me. So I really just wanted to go through what we've been talking about over the course of the last 4 budget workshops. So our current budget is at 5.39% of an increase. Due to changes in estimated debt service payments, the allowable tax levy would now be 2.64%. So if you recall, at our March 21st workshop, we were at a 2.37%. So this has increased slightly. So as always, our budgeting decisions are guided by our strategic plan, keeping a focus on students and what's best for our students. Our budget adoption by the Board of Ed will be on April 18th. We have, all districts have until April 24th to actually adopt their proposed budget. Again, as a reminder, the public budget hearing is May 2nd, and then we will have our budget vote and school board election on May 16th. So as we've been discussing all along, we have certain budget challenges. We had an increase in our foundation aid of about $4.9 million. Unfortunately, this was offset by large increases in our health insurance premium of about 18%. We had increases to the retirement system. Our transportation costs have increased quite a bit. We've had increases to contractual costs due to inflation. We have capital projects that are still necessary. We're still addressing our roof situation around the district. We also have rising utility costs, which we're estimating over 25% increase in utilities. We also have seen an increase to our general insurance premium. If you remember, I think it was about 2 years ago in September, we had Hurricane Ida, which the district sustained considerable damages. So this chart reflects really just a comparison to the prior year. You can see the increase in the appropriations budget, which is the 5.39%. And with that, it carries an increase of 2.63% in the tax levy. So that's just slightly below the 2.64% that's allowable. And to review some of the positions that have been included in this program, in this budget, we have 3 ICT program FTEs at SUSA that were funded by the American Rescue Plan. We'll now be putting those into the general fund. We'll have 1 FTE general ed teacher at Salem, 1 general ed teacher at SUSA, a 0.5 FTE speech at SUSA, and also psychologists. These will all be coming into the general fund. It maintains all existing academic, extracurricular, and support programs. It also proposes adding the following positions: 1 FTE Manor Haven teacher, 1 FTE high school E&L teacher, 1 high school science teacher, 1 high school maintainer, 1 daytime custodian at Daly, and this is to address the new addition that we have at Daly. We have 2 FTE for bus drivers. We'll also be purchasing 2 buses, and this will be saving us money in our transportation codes. Also, it proposes 3 FTEs of security guards, as well as 1 technology administrator. This also lists the very student-focused requests that have been put into the budget and remain in the budget. We have the occupational ed program. We're expanding that. If you recall, last year we added 10 positions for juniors. Those 10 juniors will move into the senior And then we'll have another 10 juniors that will start the BOCES program, so it's a continuation. That adds about $140,000 to the budget. We'll also have expansion of our Twilight program, which is an alternative instructional setting, and it has been very successful this year. So we have funds to increase that. We also will have the second year of our security server upgrade. We have scholarship high school student entry kiosks. We also have funding of the cultural arts program, purchasing of musical instruments, purchasing supplies and materials for graphic design at our high school. This includes new line interactive TV and 10 Canon Rebel cameras. We also have an increase to the playground equipment code. We had our playground committee come and present to the board. So we've increased from 75,000 to, we're going from 50,000, increasing it 75,000 to 125,000. We also have equipment to support the operation and maintenance of our plants. We have a transfer to capital for the Daly and the Salem elementary roof projects, as well as repairs and upgrades to the bathrooms and flooring district-wide. This does not include the tennis courts, which we had discussed at the last meeting. Mr. Graham is here to discuss the tennis court situation and kind of explain why we recommend holding off on that to a future budget. It also includes new flooring for the middle school and high school fitness rooms. It has additions to Project Adventure climbing apparatus, new championship banners for the high school gymnasium, as well as furniture for new construction and the steam rooms. So we have the daily additions that will be ready for school in September. We need to purchase some classrooms, equipment, and desks. We also have Seuss's steam room will require some classroom furniture as well. We have additional funds for clubs, for field trips, and student classroom supplies. Certain classroom supplies will be purchased by the district, which will actually be saving families money. We have funding for professional development. We also have a lease purchase agreement as part of this budget in order to refresh the one-to-one student technology devices. We spoke about this at our budget and facilities meeting yesterday, and I can share a little bit more details of that at the end of my presentation. We'll also be replacing hardware for the district's technology infrastructure, as well as having Wi-Fi for outdoor learning spaces. And what this is having one space per building so that instruction can take place outside. We think it's really a valuable thing, and it was something that our administrative team all discussed. Also, it has purchase of the 2 30-passenger school buses. So if you recall, a couple of budget workshops ago, we had a deficit of about $3.7 million. So some of the things we did to get below the tax cap, it took really fine-tuning, and I thank Jessica Mack and all of the administrators for all of the assistance that went into looking at the budget and really having a fine-tooth comb. We looked at the estimated revenue for the interest and miscellaneous and the use of facilities. We increased those codes because looking at trends over the last 10 years, we felt we could increase those codes because it was kind of a conservative estimate. We're also proposing to use $100,000 from the eBallot reserve. Now, this reserve is the employee benefits accrued liability. And if every year we have teachers or staff retire, there's sometimes payout for their sick time that's been accrued. This would actually go to offset that expenditure. We also looked at the E&L cost code requests, and those were reduced because of redundancies we found with other codes. We also had a reduction of support staff to reflect the current student needs. We reduced the transportation costs because they were offset by the purchasing of the buses and hiring the drivers. We reduced contractual codes for facilities by hiring a maintainer at the high school. We can avoid some contractual costs that we might have to hire someone to do these simple maintenance tasks. We also reduced overtime for the custodial codes. This is because it was difficult to find custodians and actually fill the positions. We are now closer to where we need to be, but also hiring an additional custodian for daily will reduce the overtime. Also, computer-assisted instructional codes. Mr. Maloney and Jessica went through those codes also, looking for redundancies, so we were able to decrease those as well. We also reduced the security requests. There were a lot of requests for the contractual code to increase. So we'll be developing a long-term plan to phase in all of these requests. So with a tax levy increase of the 2.63%, the draft budget of $184,265,295 is below the tax levy limit. And now I wanted to discuss and answer any questions. I know we really went into a lot of this at the Budget and Facilities meeting, but I just didn't know if anybody had any other questions for me. So what it is, the state allows school districts to actually enter into a lease purchase agreement for instructional equipment. So what we would be doing, instead of purchasing each year different computers and devices, we would be able to do a lease where we can purchase about $3.7 million worth of equipment and spread the payments over 3 years. So we would have a payment of about $1.3 million each year. That would allow us to get devices for all the students, for teachers, and for some of our paraprofessionals. But one of the main reasons we looked into this, students will be required to do the state testing. Getting touchscreen Chromebooks will be really beneficial to our students because it'll allow them to take the test where they can actually tap on the screen instead of trying to write things in there. So are there any questions?
So, hold on. First of all, Ms. Manuel, I just want to say, on behalf of the Board of Education and I think the community and the staff and the students, that we really want to thank you and your office and everyone who was involved in, I know this was, coming into this year, we were really wondering what this budget was going to look like with inflation and everything going on around us. And I think you guys have done a really good job of finding a balanced budget under the tax cap that allows us not only to continue our current program, but actually even add FTEs. So I think really congratulations are in order to everybody. The Board of Ed, I know this was mostly discussed already at the Budget Committee meeting, so hopefully, unless there's like really emergency questions that would make changes to this budget, we're going to try to move to the next item. I know. Is it?
It wouldn't be changes, but I have a logistical question. So I know I asked questions yesterday during the Budget Committee meeting, but this one just occurred to me. In the lease program, I know that we're in a position to sell the current devices we have at some cost savings, well, back or wherever the market is. But on the lease program, the debt that we will pay, because are we carrying debt when we lease these? I mean, is there an additional cost to leasing that we will never recoup? And are you able to tell us how much that is a year and why it's beneficial to incur that debt rather than to continue to buy outright and then sell the laptops and the iPads as they become obsolete or start to get near the end of their service life?
Yes, so each year the district goes out and we actually, we go out for a TAN, which is a tax anticipation notice. So the district has a financial advisor that assists us with that. They'll do a bid and we'll actually borrow money from financial institutions so that we need money before all the taxes come due. So those same financial advisors will assist us with this lease. They're projecting that it would be about a 3% interest rate on this. So the schedule that they prepared for me shows that the interest would be about $175,000 for the 3 years. So it would be about $80,000 a year of the cost. What this does for the district, though, instead of having basically waves where you have big expenditures because your technology is becoming obsolete and can't support the programs, sometimes you'll have big increases, then some years you'll have a decrease. This helps us to level it off. So while you are paying for that, the borrowing, I think it's beneficial because it allows us to do things where we can purchase this equipment and have it distributed to all of our students at once, so everybody's on the same page. Chris Johnner and also Mr. Maloney, they've tried to look at what we currently have and what might be a buyback for that. Now, it's all based on the condition of the items and stuff, but with what we currently have, we're thinking probably like $200,000 is what we would be able to recoup. That's a very conservative estimate. But if you do a purchase lease agreement every 3 years, those devices still have value. They'll have more than what you currently have. So you'll be able to sell those back and hopefully put that towards the debt service to help defray it. Thank you. Sure.
Again, thank you very much, Ms. Manuel. And we are going to move right on to the tennis court presentation. So who's doing that? Brian, you're back in the hot seat.
So we put this together after the last board meeting. It was definitely a hot seat. I wasn't prepared, so I wanted to be a little bit more prepared this time. These are our current tennis courts. This is a survey that we did in preparation of replacing the courts, and this is how it is now. The current proposal is to replace in kind, so the outline of the tennis courts won't change, although there are some minor design changes, including benches for athletes and some minor fencing changes. This is a presentation I did yesterday for the budget and facilities presentation. It's going to cover the conditions, current conditions, the types of cracks, repair options, and the replacement timeline. These are the current courts. So you see in the picture on the left, you'll see a minor crack, and the court to the right has 3, where you can see those repairs that was made in August of 2022. These 2 courts have longer cracks, but they're the same type of crack. They're not deeper, they're not structural, they are still surface cracks. Types of cracks, all tennis courts will eventually suffer cracks. Tennis courts cracks are often referred to as zombie cracks because despite all efforts, they keep coming back. So again, you'll see those discoloration on those pictures was from a repair that was done in August, and they do reopen up as the winter comes on and you have expansion and contraction. The 3 types of cracks are surface, structural, or heaving. Surface cracks are typically minor, and they're repaired with either a crack fill, as you saw in those pictures, or a membrane product, which is the next level up of a repair similar to a mesh or a drywall repair, which is then feathered into the asphalt. Structural cracks are more serious. They're impacting the underlayment. They can be temporarily repaired to make the court playable, but often they need an overlay or a replacement. In coordinating with Mr. Schratweiser, and I believe the beliefs of Section 8, overlays are not being used in Long Island or Nassau County. Heaving is when we have a raised crack, so if you have any hydrostatic pressure, the court starts to raise and lower. You have a tripping hazard, those courts would be closed to play, and they would need to be rectified before they were put back in action for obviously injury concerns. And most of this came from Cracking Up, a tennis industry magazine. These are some budgetary numbers that we put together. So again, we did some repairs in August of 2022. We would want to repair these courts again this summer to allow us to get through the fall and spring season of next year before we could do a 2024 replacement. And these are budgetary numbers representing three different options. 30 to 35,000 for that right way or Armor-Tech crack repair that we talked about. That's that mesh system that covers those surface cracks and spreads out that repair and should get us through both seasons. A crack repair with a flexible sealant, similar to what was done in August 22. Typically, it would be good for the fall season, but it usually will have some further expansion and contraction over the winter, and usually the spring season starts, it's still too cool to do that repair, so we're not really able to get that same level of repair. Or a resurface of the courts at 45 to 50,000. We don't recommend that based on, again, we're only trying to get through 2 more seasons. Replacement, so that's the option that we're looking at the summer of 2024, and that includes reconstructing the 5 existing tennis courts in kind. It does include drainage, and that's a sticking point because when we did talk about could we possibly do this without SED approval, we could consider it a maintenance project if we were just resurfacing the courts, but once we involve drainage, it does need a building permit, and why we need the SED approval. Right now, SED approval's at about 20 weeks, and that's what puts us out past this summer, and we don't want to run the risk of missing the fall season. It includes fencing, asphalt, color coding, and nets, replacing the asphalt walkway along the west side of the courts, and install dry wells to address some of the washout that we're having in the Montfort lot stairs. And then the add alternate, again, if we do include this in the next budget cycle, we would look to see if there's any opportunity to include the lighting in the original installation as opposed to putting in the infrastructure now and following up with the lighting at a later date. So this is that area along the west side of the courts. Right now there's an asphalt walkway there, and all of those courts drain down to that area. It is tiered, it goes down to the field and the Montfort parking lot, and we're having significant washout there. So the plan does call to excavate that area and install some drainage. There's some pictures showing those tennis courts in that corner. You see a natural swale that's formed from drainage, and then you'll see both sides of the staircase have pretty significant signs of drainage. Replacement timeline, finalized the design 4 weeks. So even though the architect has the survey and he's pretty confident that it's a replacement in kind, Mr. Schrottweiser has requested that we look at some of the smaller items. Again, as I said, some 4-foot fencing separating player benches from the playing area, reorienting some of the spectator seating. So we do want to allow that process about 4 more weeks. We could potentially send this up to SED, included in next month's SECRA, that will have the Daly and Salem capital projects on it. It would take approximately 20 weeks of approval for SED. We wouldn't get the building permit until next budget cycle, but we'd be able to have all of that work done ahead of time. The temporary repairs this summer is about a 2-week project, depending on weather, and lead time on materials is about 8 to 12 weeks. That goes up significantly if we do consider the lighting, but nothing that we couldn't accommodate by the summer of 24. And construction of those courts would be approximately 5 weeks. An approximate 2023-2024 timeline, finalize the design by May, submit for SED approval by June of 2023. Again, we would go through that process, the review, any edits, but we would not get the building permit until a passage of next year's budget. We would issue an LOI in July of 23. That's a letter of intent. Sorry, I'm getting better with my acronyms, but we would issue an LOI in July, and that would allow us to hopefully hold all the pricing at this year's pricing and not have to incur any charges. Temporary repairs would be completed over July and August, procure materials in the winter of 23-24, and construct the courts hopefully in June and July of 2024. We would look to schedule that for as soon as the spring season completes. This way we can try to get the courts done in July as we have athletes returning in August. I think that's it.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Graham. But before we get into questions, do you have a price estimate for the construction?
We would send this out to bid. I think our budgetary estimate is approximately $900,000.
On top of the 350?
The lighting is 354,000 is a budgetary
Right.
number, and the courts with the drainage is approximately 900,000.
So the dream project is basically $1.25 million. Yeah, okay, great. So with that, I'm going to start with Dr. Block.
So we had talked last week about splitting up the lighting and the not the resurfacing, the replacement of the courts. Is there any reason that we couldn't do the lighting this year? It seems like the issue is that we couldn't replace the courts this year and it would have to spill into next year's budget. But what about would it be possible to do the lighting this year?
I can look into that.
If I could, we were actually thinking of looking into renting lights so that the kids could be able to actually play longer. So maybe for next year, we could just rent the lights.
So it seems like the installation of the lighting could be pushed into transfer to capital. Do I have that right? No, not true.
Actually putting them in and
Yeah.
laying the groundwork for that.
In this year's budget.
I suppose we would have to look into it.
Yeah, yes, yeah, it would change the numbers, but we could potentially do it. One of the things that we talked about last week was splitting up and that it would be easier for the budget to do this in two pieces. And what we said was last week, or 2 weeks ago, was let's do the replacement of the courts this year and the lights at some later time. We're currently being told that we are unable to do the courts, replace the courts this year, and we should do it in next year's budget. So it seems like maybe this is a reasonable time, and I want to open it to the board for discussion to actually add the lights this year.
I just want to clarify that either project would still be constructed in the summer of 2024. It wouldn't matter which budget cycle they were in. I think that was one of the things we we're trying to point out is with the SED approval of 20 weeks, the construction would be in the summer of 2024, whether the project was included in this year's budget and/or next year's budget.
So the lights alone, I think what Adam is trying to ask is, the lights by themselves would still trigger that SED approval process. So it's not, we can't buy time by doing that first.
You could separate the funding, but you would still be beholden to that SED approval process.
Okay, great. So just to be clear, was this informational, or is there a certain ask that you're asking of us in terms of starting this process?
We wanted to discuss it because I know at the last board meeting, we said maybe we should look into increasing the transfer to capital. So it's our recommendation to hold off until the following school year because of this approval.
When would you need the board's authorization if you were going to move ahead with, I guess, the schedule that you laid out, Mr. Graham, in terms of getting an LOI out by July? What would you need to do? I guess, what are the steps to get up until there, and what would you need authorization from the board, I guess, in order to have a number and a truth?
So the first step is we would include it in the SECRA, and that's our environmental review with Daly and Salem's roof. That doesn't commit us to doing it, it just starts that process. We would ask our architect, and again, we have about 4 weeks left of working with Mr. Schrottweiser and fine-tuning that design. Then we would send it to the SED, up to the state for approval. But after we got that back from the state, then we would send it out for quotes. We wouldn't have to put it out competitively bid. We could try to put it out for quotes off of contract, and our timeline would have that by July.
And when,
I'm sorry, one more thing I just want to clarify. When you have a capital exclusion, it's because you're going to actually spend the funds in that year. If we do this, you wouldn't be spending the funds in the 23-24 school year, so it wouldn't be excluded from the capital exclusion, and you'd be actually adding $900,000 to a budget, and you'd be over the tax levy limit.
right. But what I'm trying to understand is if you guys go ahead with this process of, I guess, getting it in the secret and all that. Now, what are the costs to the taxpayers, I guess, to get to that point? Nothing, it's all, there must, I mean, there's design, the architect. is that
There'll be
on?
some design fees with the architect.
And that's already done? You already started that process, correct?
We've started that process,
Okay.
yeah.
And what about the repairs that you mentioned? Is that included in the budget?
They'll be included in the out of our operating.
And is that accounted for? Okay. So it sounds like, unless anyone disagrees, this is the path that we're, go ahead, Ms. Maloney.
Thank you. I don't disagree. I have a question. In terms of the lights, remind me, have we talked about potentially adding the lights to the energy performance contracts that we're looking at?
Yeah, the energy performance contract is going to look at every light, every utility, piece in the district. Unfortunately, typically, energy performance contracts are looking at reducing energy. When you're not replacing lights, you're just adding them. It might not factor into the savings, but we're going to take it into account and see if there's any opportunities to include them.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Gilliard?
Just wanted to add a detail that we talked about in budget that I think was important to the budget committee in thinking about this as well. Mr. Graham pointed out that, we already have several large items in our transfer to capital this year, which are exclusions from the budget, but they do raise our allowable levy limit, which results in a higher tax bill for the taxpayer if we didn't do it. So if we were to add the tennis courts this year, which now we can't do anyway because of the SED process, we wouldn't be able to get it done in time, we would be raising the amount, the percent that the taxpayer is paying. And Mr. Graham pointed out that next year we'll have finished these couple of large roof projects that are in this year's transfer to capital. And so we potentially have a lot more room next year to be looking at a project of this size to go under transfer to capital and still be trying to keep our budget numbers at a same sort of reasonable level from year to year instead of having it be a jump based on the tennis courts that it would be this year.
Go ahead.
I understand that there's a delay if we were to budget for the coming year and that we end out at the same exact date, so I get that. But my question is with the letter of intent, other than having to pay the architects or the designers whatever fee that we're working with them on so that we can file something, is there any other obligation on the district? If we were to decide, no, we're not going to fund this year, we're out that money that we needed for architectural services, but we're not bound to anything.
No, the letter of intent would be serve two functions. A, it would hold us at the pricing to avoid escalation, and it would also get us on the schedule. So we want to be, again, this is a tight window. We want to try to schedule this for as soon as the spring season is over. We'll still have school in session, but we'll be able to do some initial mobilization, and then right in those first couple of weeks of July, we want this project to be on the calendar first for any of the potential contractors, so that we can get the courts back and open for the community, and then obviously open in August for our athletes.
But if we decided not to go forward with this in the coming year, it's
Letter of
okay,
intent
we're
is
allowed
not
to say.
it's not a contract, it's just saying that,
Perfect.
upon the passage of our budget, this is what we intend to do, and the contractor typically would take that and start to procure materials, et cetera.
So it helps us, it doesn't hurt us.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gilliard?
Just to follow on that, it reminded me, Ms. Brooks, of another question I had. I'm assuming the letter of intent too, it locks in the pricing for us if it goes up. But if the pricing were to go down, could we seek that lower pricing, or are we stuck on that as long as we stick with the person that we first went with?
I guess it would depend. There's a lot of variables in that. If we were doing it off a contract or if we put it out to be competitively bid, that would be two different scenarios. If the contract was renegotiated during that time period, then we would go to the more current contract pricing.
Great. So basically, to tie this in a bow, you guys are going to do the repairs necessary to get through this season, and you're going to move ahead with getting ready for us to pull the trigger during the next budget cycle for the following year to finally replace the courts.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Everybody's good with that, right? Okay. Moving right along. Thank you very much, Mr. Mr. Graham. Okay, committee reports. It's right back to you, Ms. Villar.
We actually haven't had a policy meeting since our last evening meeting, but we have a policy meeting tomorrow morning in the annex at 9:30.
Great. Ms. Epstein?
I would just say that the budget was well presented today. Thank you for everyone. We did support as a committee the recommendation about the tennis courts, and we also as a committee supported the lease purchase agreement for the computers as well. And our next meeting, as of right now, is scheduled for May 8th. Just for everyone's edification, you may have seen, we of course have no budgetary numbers. There's an extension filed till April 10th. It is, maybe we'll schedule something for the 17th if we need to before our April 18th meeting. But other than that, we're good.
Thank you. Ms. Melkonian?
Thank you. We had a wonderful discussion this morning with the curriculum committee and special guests, Dr. Bear and Ms. Director from the guidance department on graduation rates. I encourage those that didn't get to participate that it will be on the website if it already is. And our next meeting is an overview and review of core extension at Weber, and that is scheduled for May 19th.
Thank you very much, Ms. Melkonian. Ms. Epstein, back to you.
Our next meeting for the audit committee is scheduled for April 26th at 9:30, and we will be discussing the security audit.
Great. And speaking of, I'm sorry, actually, Ms. Brooks, you're next.
Yes, we haven't met since the last Board of Ed meeting. I just attached for informational purposes that we approved the charter at the last meeting, and I cleaned it up, so it's nice and fresh and doesn't have any notes or anything in it. It's ready to go. Our next meeting will be on May 30th in person.
Okay.
In the KM Annex.
Thank you very much. And emergency preparedness has not met, but Dr. Hines, I'm going to put you on the spot because I happened to see Mr. Becker outside of one of the schools with a clipboard the other day, so I do want to see if you could just give us a quick update on how the IB Plus audit is progressing.
Sure. So I'm happy to report that Mr. Becker from IB Plus has started making his rounds to visit with staff at our schools. He met with me earlier last week as well. And I'm hoping by the end of May, we will have something to, actually mid-May, to present to the board. But yeah, he's meeting with lots of staff members right now and also looking at the outer perimeter and inside the buildings as well. So looking forward to his report.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 12. Right? Yes, item 12. Could we please have a motion for the approval of the March 21st, 23 BOE meeting minutes, the March 9th, 2023 Legislative Task Force meeting minutes, the March 15th, 2023 Budget and Facilities meeting minutes? Motion, Ms. Brooks, a second. Dr. Block, all in favor? 7-0. Great, the minutes are approved. Moving on to the consent agenda, which is action items under 13. If we could please have a motion for the approval of 13.1.1 through 13.6.1. Ms. Brooks, a second. Ms. Bays, all in favor? Ms. Gilliar, that's a hand. Okay. The action items are approved, 7-0. Okay. Board policy. We have one policy, I believe, on for approval tonight, which is policy 1530 on smoking, vaping, and other tobacco use on school premise. Ms. Gilliar, we're going to take a vote on this? Yeah. Okay. So we have, I don't believe we need a motion, correct? We just take a vote? Okay. Can we have a vote, all in favor of approval of policy 1530? Oh, everybody? 7-0. Okay, so policy 1530 is approved, and we will make sure that gets updated on the website. Okay. Moving on to, we have to do the rest of the task force approval today?
Yes.
Okay, so Ms. Brooks?
Okay, a few weeks ago, Pam Ollendorf, who has served on the Legislative Task Force for many years, let me know that due to personal time constraints, she was going to voluntarily resign from the task force. And so given that this board has approved all of the members who are on the task force, we also need to formally accept resignation so that that spot is, like, it's legally open for the coming round of new selections. So item 15.1, I just ask that the board approve the resignation of Pam Ollendorf formally.
All in favor? 7-0. Great. It's
And we
approved.
thank Ms. Ollendorf for her years of volunteer service and her
Yes.
very invaluable input over the years.
Yes. Okay. So, moving on to old business, I think that we're going to actually, let's do 16.2 first, if everyone doesn't object to that. I know, so, and then we'll go with the answers. So, starting with 16.2, so in response to, actually, not in response to, but coincidentally, I know this is what Ms. Mawani had discussed earlier, a trustee did ask to change their vote on whether or not we would be approving a letter, and Ms. Brooks has drafted a letter regarding universal school meals that is on the agenda for anybody to read. So it's the same letter as last time. So without discussion, we're just going to go around and just take a simple vote on the letter again.
Mr. Smith, I'm sorry, but I think
No.
procedurally what we have to do is
Yes.
first ask for a board member, and I guess Ms. Melkonian, who wants to redo the vote, should ask for us to rescind the vote. So
Well, I'm
procedurally-
asking for us to
No,
make
we need first a
Well,
motion.
I don't think
Hold on,
we do,
hold
because we
on.
have 16.2 is on the agenda, it's the letter
Right.
again, so I'm going to
The
take a
board
vote.
took a vote, so
And
you
we're
need a
gonna take a vote.
motion from a board member to rescind the vote. Somebody needs to second that, and then we can re-vote.
I don't think it's true. It's
Yes.
a slightly different letter, but that's fine. I don't think it's true. Okay, so Ms. Melkonian, would you like to make a motion to rescind your vote? Since we're going to be very process-oriented. Yeah. So, if you
How
can
do
make a
make
motion
a
to rescind the
motion
vote.
to rescind my vote?
To rescind the vote, the entire
To
vote.
rescind the vote.
Yeah. Ms. Brooks is seconding it, and all in favor of rescinding the vote. Did you vote?
I'm not okay with rescinding our votes, because I think it really gets into a dicey situation. I have no problem with the topic. I want the universal school meal lunch letter to go across, but procedurally, what's to stop us from, like, approving the budget and then a week later saying, oh, I changed my mind and I don't want to go with the budget? I think this really gets us into some dicey territory.
Okay, so again.
So I guess I don't approve the motion
Okay,
of
so
that.
I'm going to make it, I guess, just simple. Ms. Melkonian made a motion, so all in favor of the motion? We're just going to take a vote. So one, everyone who's in favor of Ms. Melkonian's motion, can raise their hand. All, okay, that's 3. Okay, so if that's the way we're going to do it, then we move on.
I would just say that boards are allowed to make motions at the next immediate Board of Education meeting, are allowed to make a motion to rescind a vote from a previous meeting. And I think it's not done lightly. We have to approve a budget by a certain time, so I don't know that scenario is applicable. But I have seen board meetings where tenure was revised, was a vote for tenure was actually, not saying that Port Washington should do this, but at a subsequent meeting, when new information came forward, a board member made a motion to rescind the vote of tenure, and then that's actually what happened at that meeting. So this is for a letter to send to the governor, since we now have extra time, right? We voted, and I'm just explaining that this is just for a letter, right? So I'm just saying for the record, that's why I agreed to rescind the previous vote, and that's my reasoning. It's just a letter to the governor to support the universal school meals. We have a school board member who obviously regrets the decision she made at the last meeting and was trying to correct that, so.
But I think it can be noted now for the public that Ms. Melkonian would have been in support of the letter, which I think is the point. And again, there's a form letter available that every school board member and community member can send on their own, and I encourage everybody to do so if that's something that you would be in support of. Is there?
So, at the risk of complicating this more, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think Mrs. Malwani just gave us a great deal more information about the impact here. I was one of the people that would have been willing to sign the letter last time, but I actually now would be in favor of revising the letter we have to note the figures that we were given on the specific impacts that it has here, which I think is additional reason to speak out on it. My reservation, my only reservation at the time was whether or not the state would take it out of our budget elsewhere. And I think we have our state assemblywoman and her staff people telling us that's not going to be the case. So,
We're not. But
so
let her. She can finish what she's gonna
personally,
say.
I'm suggesting that perhaps we have a new letter that adds that detailed information, and maybe just the board members who are in favor of signing it should sign that letter and send it.
Well,
instead of
I think that
further hashing
they
it out.
can't sign it on behalf of the school board. and
No, but
I
we
would-
can certainly sign it on behalf of ourselves. Well,
You can tailor
I
the
mean, I think-
NISBA template,
So-
you can put your
Right,
own
and I
language
would
into
suggest-
the
I would
NISBA
suggest that
letter.
that's what everybody does, Ms. Melkonian, and then we're gonna close
So,
it.
so I think maybe those of us who think that we should send a letter could put our heads together and decide if we would like to put our names on the same letter, which we certainly can do as individuals.
Okay, yes, Ms. Melkonian.
For the members of the board who have procedural questions, if this is actually legal, it's not about a procedural question. If it's legal to rescind a vote, it's legal to rescind a vote. So if that's the conversation, I'd like to have that conversation.
Well, you made a motion to rescind, to pull back the vote that was taken, and then the whole board has to, you need a majority of the board to support that motion in order to undo the vote that was done.
I understand that, but I am making a point to those that did not support the motion that you're not really making a procedural argument. You're asking a legal question, and if it's legal to rescind votes, then it's really not about that.
It's legal to rescind votes if the majority of the board approves the motion.
No, legal is legal, a motion
Right.
is a motion.
As chair of the legislative task force, I accept the fact that a motion was made, the motion was seconded, then requires a majority of the board to support the motion. We don't have a majority support, and I accept that, as with all things democratic.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next agenda item. Okay, so this is actually going now back to 16.1. We had some community comments that were asked at prior meetings. So the first one is, this was actually not I thought Ms. Melkonian brought this up, but we had talked about, student representation at BOE meetings. So you had said that was something you were interested in, Dr. Hines, so you can make that proposal to us, please.
Definitely. So right now I'm working with Dr. Bear, who in turn is working with her staff to, with the process as far as student selection, and we're hoping to have a recommendation to the board within the next 3 weeks. So we'll have an update in regard to what that looks like, and I think the board will be very pleased. And then I know there's another, moving just below where I see March 21st. So we had a outstanding young man discuss the Bilingual Buddies project. And I think the request was, will we consider funding it? And I think it's well known that the transportation costs are really is where the sticking point is. So I can tell you right now, we need to assess the total cost relating to transportation, but as of right now, we're looking to commit an additional $5,000 toward that to make that as fluid as possible. So that's where we are in relation to the Buddies project. And I know for the hydration station, I'm going to ask Mr. Graham, if you wouldn't mind, maybe, because we can't get enough of you, just one more time to give us an update.
And for anyone who wasn't here, I'm just going to repeat the question that there was a student group who inquired about how are we determining the rollout and where we're putting them, how are we prioritizing locations, and how does the district maintain these hydration stations?
We do have hydration stations in all the buildings. We do have a plan we prefer to add a hydration station or a combination hydration station slash bubbler each year. This past year, we had one scheduled for each building. Unfortunately, both Guggenheim and Sousa needed the replacement of a unit, so we couldn't do an additional unit. We did a replacement, but we are on schedule to add a bottle filler to each building for the 23-24 year. We also, with the support of Dr. Baer and the high school, we had 6 units that were delivered last week, and 2 of them have been installed already. So we'll have 8 units added to Schreiber by the end of this year, and hopefully most of them will be up over the break. We do maintain the units, the plumbing maintenance department and/or the maintainer at Weber, and in the 23-24 year, the maintainer at the high school will be responsible for that. They're on a cycle. They're checked several times a year. Part of our lead and water drinking practices is we have to have a best management plan for all drinking water, and that's part of that process. The filters are changed. Most of the newer units have an indicator light on them, telling us, the length that filter is good for, but we're usually preemptive in changing them ahead of that schedule anyway.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Graham. I think we really have to ask questions? Do we have to? Okay, please.
Sorry, Adam. So I'm wondering what the cost is of the hydration stations.
It depends on the type of installation. Some of them are recessed in the wall. Some of them are dual units for ADA compliance. Some of them are, as I said, hydration only, bottle filler only. Some of them are bubblers, but approximately $2,000 to $3,000, depending on the style.
So I guess, I know you're managing this. Once we get to the point where the 8 have been installed at Schreiber, are we at the point that we think we should be for every building, or are there more to be added, and over how many years?
I think every time we address a water fountain, we would look to bring it to that new standard of being filtered, refrigerated, and being a dual unit. I think we're at a good place. I think every student in every building will have access to filtered bottle filler, but each time we address a unit, we would look to bring it up to that newer style.
So, not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot, right? How many more, is it 20 more water fountains? Is it 100 more water fountains? Just
So
ballpark.
we have a total of 86 drinking outlets in the district, and right now we have 20, which are the combination units, and 7, which are hydration stations only. So there is a fair amount of bubblers only that remain. Again, I inherited this practice of 1 per building each year, which is a good space to be in, and they are spread out. We did work with the building administrators to prioritize which water fountains are used most. We tried to do the ones nearest. Obviously, all the cafeterias have access to a filtered water fountain. We prioritized at Sousa close to the gym or close to the entrance to recess. So we are trying to replace the most used water fountains first.
So I'm not going to pin the 2 per year on you, but I guess I think it's important to say out loud that our students came to this meeting and they asked us to lead, right? Actually, really, they asked us to catch up with them. And I think that if we did a poll of every student in every building, something like 99% of them would be carrying a reusable water bottle. And I think the reusable cup or water bottle among adult percentage is a lot lower. This is the next generation. We're educating them, and they are beyond us on their environmental concerns. So I know it's a financial impact, but I'm hearing it's each individual one is not a huge cost. Can we look at the overall, or maybe are you already looking at the overall picture of?
Let's bring this up in a different forum to the board if that's something that we want to ask Mr. Graham to.
Well, I'm not asking him to talk about it now, but we can bring, I'm asking for it to come back somewhere else.
Let's have the board, I think you have to bring it up to the board if that's something that the board wants.
Okay, so I'm
let's-
asking it like that
Okay,
then.
so-
Actually, like, does the board want to discuss this or get a little more information? Because I think the second part of the student ask was, we also have all these machines where you can
Right.
buy bottled water. Why not have more hydration stations
you, Mr. Graham.
instead? And there's probably more cost to it.
Okay, so I think that's something that the board will need to discuss, and maybe, I don't know if you want to put that in the long-term tracker or something, and we can see how everyone wants to do that. Thank you. Great. Okay, and then there's one more, which is item 3, which is how will decreasing the number of EAs and TAs on staff affect our school students? I think that was answered previously, so whoever's looking for that answer can refer to, oh yes, wasn't it Ms. Alvarez? Yes, it was Mrs. McLean, and also I think Ms. Alvarez had referred to it. So that was answered earlier in the meeting. Okay. So we are now going to move to new business. Does anybody have new business that they would like to bring up? No? Great. So we're now going to move to our second and final opportunity for the community to be heard. Again, everyone is entitled to 3 minutes, and we will endeavor to answer any questions. No? Okay. So we are, oh, we do, okay.
Hi, my name is Marika Lyons, and I just had a comment and question about the procedure we just saw about the rescinding a vote. I understand that how the point that Ms. Epstein made about not wanting to change votes willy-nilly and wanting consistency, but because there was new evidence presented and there were comments last week on this topic, it was a little disappointing that that wouldn't be taken into effect or into account, and that, you know, in a short amount of time, if a board member got new information and felt that that would change their vote, is there a way to, instead of calling it rescinding a vote, asking for a new vote based on new information, or maybe modifying the letter based on new information and voting on it again? Because I thought that Ms. Melwani really presented some good information, and that maybe, you know, would change someone's mind. So I thought that it would be important to reconsider that and you know, not penalize a board member for changing their mind in a short amount of time. So I guess it's a question. Can you, instead of calling it rescinding a vote, reconsider based on new information? Thank you.
Well, go ahead, Ms. Brooks.
I know we normally don't answer questions. Hi. Procedurally, if we were to change the letter, my understanding is, in terms of substance, we would have to bring it back to the board at the next board meeting, or the next board meeting, for another vote on the revised letter, because the content will have changed. That's my understanding of the process. If I'm wrong, somebody tell me. And so the next meeting is April 18th, which likely will be past, I mean, we can only hope that it will be past the time that the state budget has been approved. So the purpose was in trying to use the letter that everybody has already seen and had the opportunity to approve 2 weeks ago. You know, I really hope, it would be nice if we could bring it back on the 18th and vote again, but it really would be bad to do it that way, because we really need Albany to approve the budget. And the purpose was to get this letter to Albany before the budget was approved. And if I'm misspeaking, you know, so, yeah, so.
Thank you very much for speaking. Anybody else? Any additional comments? Okay. So we are not going to recess to executive session. So actually, this time I'm going to reverse the order. Before we adjourn, I will say that our next meeting is on April 18th followed by May 2nd of 2023. Great. Yes. Yes, happy break to everybody, and we'll now have a motion to adjourn. I'll make the motion to adjourn. Second, Ms. Bays, all in favor, 7-0. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.